We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Labor Day, and welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. As we take a look at the film, we had a chance to kind of digest what happened with Ohio State and Notre Dame. This is our Upon Further Review, what we learned about Ohio State's win over Notre Dame podcast. And glad to have you on board with us here on this holiday Monday morning. I'm Brendan Gulick. That's Craig Hyson. You can either stream this live with us on our YouTube channel, or you can listen to it after the fact, either on YouTube or wherever you like to get your favorite podcasts. It'll be posted here shortly after we wrap up. We're talking about an Ohio State win over Notre Dame. Craig, the best thing about going 1-0, chance to go 2-0. So that's a good thing. We're going to dive in right away on that. But we got to start with something that maybe it's a little more personal. It's not even Buckeye related. You know, I just saw the breaking news before we got on the air, and I saw your Masters polo, which I might snag the next time I see you. If that's missing from your your wardrobe, don't call me. Did you see that Herb Kohler just passed away?
I did.
Pretty sad, man. Herb Kohler, for those who don't know, I know this is an Ohio State pod, but for those who don't know, Herb Kohler, he was the president of the Kohler Company, Kohler Kitchen and Bath. But he was a golf nut. Golf is my thing away from work. Craig, same deal. He's the brainchild behind Whistling Straits, where they just held the Ryder Cup last year. He was a really, really impactful figure in the game of golf, certainly for resort golf in America. And he actually also purchased the Old Course Hotel at St. Andrews in Scotland. So, sad day. He was 83 years old, and I will enjoy reading some Herb Kohler things along the way, but felt like pointing that out. You have any Herb Kohler memories?
I don't, other than I want to get to Whistling Straits.
No,
so look at it all the time online. Haven't been there yet. Hopefully one day soon.
One of my favorite trips for sure. Okay, to the Buckeyes, because that's what people are here for, and we've got plenty to talk about. The overarching impression here was obviously pretty darn good. Glad that Ohio State showed the competitive stamina and the toughness. Those are the two words that were sort of out of Ryan Day's mouth pretty regularly during the offseason. And I thought they showed what they needed to late in the game. You could make an argument that they were playing as well in the fourth quarter as they played at any point prior to that. Mm-hmm. It was enough to get it done. And for a while, it left you with some uneasy feelings because the offense wasn't clicking, but the defense looked great. So before we maybe dive into some specifics, since this is the first time that you and I have been on with each other here post-game, what are your overarching thoughts?
Just starting from Saturday morning, just an unbelievable atmosphere around campus. Everybody in a great mood. The weather could have been a little bit better, but hey, it didn't dampen the day at all. Off and on rain showers all day, but it was just the atmosphere. It was one of the best. I don't want to say it was the best. I don't want to have recency bias, but one of the best atmospheres I can remember at Ohio State. With COVID kind of being in the rearview mirror, and having a chance to have everybody out and tailgating and really have that game day atmosphere that was pre-COVID that Ohio State saw for a lot of the big games. It was nice to see that again. The crowd was incredible Saturday night. And it was a star-studded affair. I mean, the celebrities and players that were walking onto the field, if you're one of those 5-star recruits or heck, even a 3-star recruit, which I'm sure we'll get into, because those guys were the guys that made the play Saturday night on top of the 5-star recruits. But it was the who's who of sports and entertainment at the Ohio State game, and just a fun day. It was incredible.
Certainly more fun when it ends with a victory. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. To your point, and Andrew and I talked about this on our instant analysis post-game show. You know, there's probably something to be said for hosting a game of that magnitude as your first game of the year, even though it might be a little harder for you to be able to do. the college football season essentially starts a week before the NFL. So you get the chance to bring back a lot of those former players. I talked to Terry McLaurin, before the game for a good 5 minutes, and he just said, look, I love coming back. I just can't get here very often.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, man, Justin Fields, Zeke Elliott, Chase Young, Thayer Munford, Terry McLaurin. I mean, there were dozens of star players in the NFL, and certainly, recent former Buckeyes that were on the sideline. And what a recruiting pitch to have Dylan Raiola, who you hope is your quarterback of the future, hanging out with Justin Fields on the sideline, and then, by the way, for Brian Hartline to take, I don't know, at least a dozen recruits over to go hang out with LeBron James. That's
cool.
A recruiting pitch that a lot of places just don't have access to. So really, I thought that was pretty cool. And I hope the Buckeyes can find a way to capitalize on that more often, because they had a boatload of high school talent signed, or I guess nobody signed at this point, committed and uncommitted. And they put on
that was a quick question I had for you, just future scheduling wise. Do you think they take advantage of that more in the future, knowing that, hey, week one, because usually they have those marquee games 2, 3, 4, knowing that the NFL's not started yet and having that help recruiting?
I hope so. I mean, I sure think that they would consider that based on how Saturday went. I will certainly ask those questions this week when I'm in the facility, but I can't imagine that Ohio State walked away from this weekend going, yeah, we could have, we swung and missed. We could have done better.
We should have started. We should have started with Toledo.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would think that if they were smart, and they do a lot of pretty intelligent things, I would think that would be part of their process going forward. All right, let's dive into what we learned, because that's kind of the overarching theme of the pod here. I wrote down a bunch of things. I watched the game from start to finish. I tried to pause it along the way to kind of take note of who was on the field in certain instances, or who wasn't on the field in certain instances. And I definitely picked up a few things along the way that I want to get into. Maybe this comes across as not a huge deal because they won the game, but one thing that really stuck with me, the Buckeyes had 4 15-yard penalties. And if you're going to win football games late in the season, that can't happen. JT Tuimoloau on the first play from scrimmage, again, whether or not you like the call, they were called, and you gave up yards on these. JT Tuimoloau was called for a high hit essentially on the quarterback, and that was tacked on at the end of a 54-yard completion. Kudos to the defense for stiffening up and not giving up a touchdown there. Who else? Zach Harrison was called for an unnecessary roughness call on a punt coverage play, and it wasn't on TV, so I didn't exactly see where it happened, but it was on a fair catch on a punt. How do you have a personal foul, unnecessary roughness on a fair catch?
Can't happen.
Inexcusable. Cannot happen. Especially from a guy who the Buckeyes are leaning heavily on his leadership. He's an upperclassman. Lathan Ransom, I didn't love the call. Tyler Buckner went into a slide. I didn't think he was committed early enough when Ransom hit him. Ransom didn't spear him, but he was called for a bad hit on a sliding quarterback. Again, it wasn't malicious. Ryan Day was irate. Lathan Ransom immediately saw the flag, and it was kind of like, you got to be kidding me. That's not a penalty.
It was an awfully quick slide on that one. He didn't have any time to do anything else other than that. So if that penalty I was okay with, there's nothing he could have done.
Yep. But either way, it's 15 yards.
Right. Another 15 yards.
And then Travion Henderson, maybe just a young play. He had a 15-yard chop block on a play that also Donovan Jackson got flagged for holding, but the 15-yard penalty, overruled the 10-yard penalty. That was a pretty egregious. I mean, it was a great block, but it's illegal. You can't spear at a guy's knees the way that Henderson did. So between that and a couple of false start penalties from DeJuan Jones, it just wasn't a super clean game from Ohio State in terms of its discipline. And maybe we just chalked it up to week one. I'm quite certain that's going to be a big emphasis moving forward, that when you're playing these next 2 weeks, the coaching staff's going to want to see some serious progress, because that just can't happen, moving forward. You can't have 4 15-yard penalties and expect that you're going to consistently win games.
Yep, you're 100% right. You can't, especially in these next 2 opponents that they should beat easily. You got to be really clean, and just, you're kind of not even so much worried about your opponent. You're more worried about what you're doing and getting ready for what's coming down the road. You just got to play a really clean game these next 2 weeks. You want to get in a couple takeaways that you had from Saturday in particular?
Let's keep rolling. I thought from a special teams perspective, obviously missing a field goal is a pain in the butt. Thankfully, it didn't come back to really hurt Ohio State. It certainly felt like it at the time. And as the game went along, it started to loom a little larger. Noah Ruggles was basically automatic last year. So I'm not worried about him missing field goals with any regularity. But obviously that was disappointing. And then I mentioned the 15-yard penalty on a fair caught punt from Notre Dame. That's not good. But on the positive side, I thought Ohio State's kickoff unit was awesome. Chip Traynham and Xavier Johnson in particular, to me, really stood out on that unit. They made 2 great tackles. I just thought the way that the Buckeyes kind of stayed in their lanes, racing up the field, and swarmed on both of those plays. Field position was a huge part of this game. Notre Dame didn't turn the ball over. So Ryan Day had to keep putting them in tough spots. And thankfully, the Buckeye punt team did a good job. There were no long punt returns against them. And I thought the kickoff unit was really solid. So I am impressed. I know it might sound silly, guys. I'm impressed by the way Ohio State took their special teams as seriously as they did, because if you watch last night's game between LSU and Florida State, special teams was an unmitigated disaster. It was awful. LSU lost 2 fumbles on punts. They had a field goal blocked. And then, of course, at the end of the game, after the most unbelievable, ridiculous Florida State gifting it to them comeback, then LSU had a point after blocked and lost the game. It was a special teams nightmare.
To your special teams point, Brendan, how proud do you think Coach Tressel was for that punt from the 44-yard line?
Yeah,
he probably loved that.
I mean, it was Tressel ball at its finest.
You ever thought you'd see Ryan Day punt from the 44? Because I didn't. When he sent the punt team out there, I could not believe it worked out in the end, but I just couldn't believe at the time that they were doing that.
You and every other Ohio State fan was like, "There's no way he's doing it." Really?
Right.
Seriously? Yeah. But then Notre Dame actually punted later in the game. I wrote it down. I think it was from like the plus 36 or plus 38 yard line. I mean,
it was in there close.
They were even deeper, and they punted because Tressel both teams really valued field position. I mean, Jim Tressel had to just have a smile plastered all over his face all game. That was awesome.
My first takeaway, obviously, it's probably the same as everybody, but how well the defense played. I had to look. I've heard the name Michael Hall, but I got to be honest, I had to look and see why the game was going on, what number he was, because I saw 51. I'm like, man, that guy's in the backfield every play. I had to look. And even Chris Fowler, one of the best in the game, he had to check the roster sheet, because I think at first he didn't know who it was, because it's a guy that's kind of come on lately. Not a big-time recruit, but, man, played his tail off and was incredible. If he's playing like that up front, it's going to be a long year for opposing offenses.
So I had a chance to see him play a couple times in high school at Streetsboro up in Northeast Ohio. I'd call it Greater Cleveland, but it's probably more Greater Akron. It's close to Kent. And, Streetsboro is not a big-time Division I high school powerhouse program. So, he looked like a man amongst boys, but he was a little raw. And last year, I think it was taking him a little extra time to kind of get going. But we started to hear toward the end of camp that this guy really could be one of Ohio State's better interior linemen if he played in games the way he was giving Ohio State offensive linemen trouble in practice. And boy, was he was an absolute star of this game. Probably the biggest standout player, because not a lot of people expected Michael Hall to play that way, not because he was far and away the best player on the field. He made, to your point, there are probably a lot of people that are like, who's 51?
Mm-hmm.
He was in the backfield constantly, and when he wasn't, he really pushed Notre Dame linemen into some tough positions. There was a play where Tommy Eichenberg came on a sack, and the whole defensive lineman had basically used the slide protection and pushed everything left from the quarterback's perspective, and the Red Sea parted, and Tommy Eichenberg came flying through the middle, and there was no chance for Buckner to get away from it. So even on plays where Hall didn't record a statistic, I thought he was really, really good.
Yep. And second thing there with the defense, we talked about, I think on Tuesday or Wednesday's show, this game being personal for Eichenberg, considering his brother playing at Notre Dame. Phenomenal game by Tommy. So he's going to have the bragging rights moving forward at the family dinner for sure, because he played incredible. I think he had 9 tackles, 2 sacks. He had his hair on fire. He was running around. He looked like he did in the Rose Bowl game, just everywhere. So great job. And like you said, I think it was Friday's show, we talked about wanting to see how they react once they get punched in the mouth. The sky was falling with the people I watched the game with on that first play of the game. So I was more calm, but the people I was watching it with, you would have thought we were back in last year all of a sudden.
I was going to say, you want to talk about, a mental rewind. I think everybody inside the stadium and in the tailgate lots looked at each other and said, you got to be kidding me, right?
Things were moving quickly, for sure.
Not good.
To just give up a field goal on that first drive was massive, just for the psyche probably of the defense. Like, hey, they just had a great play. And one missed tackle, which we can get into too, probably a little bit later on, is Josh Proctor misses one tackle and then really doesn't see the field the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, he came on. I went back because I was actually watching specifically for that. He did play, but he certainly didn't play as often. And as Lathan Ransom started to get hot, Proctor played less and less. Josh was still in some on defense. He was more in as a special teams guy. Right. I don't know if Lathan Ransom just took his job or not. Wouldn't surprise me if Ransom starts on Saturday, though. I thought Lathan Ransom was one of my big takeaways from this game. We heard the terminology from Jim Knowles a couple of weeks ago when asked about Ransom, that he reads and reacts just about as well as anybody on this team. And with that mentality, I was watching film on the game thinking, okay, do I see that? And there were some instances where it was so obvious that Ransom just anticipated something, saw it, and boom, he was the first guy to the ball. Yeah.
Jim Knowles' analogy for Lathan's great too. I think it's seeing the forest through the trees like that. Yep. You can see him diagnosing everything before it happens, and bang, he's there. When there was a couple of runs that if he misses tackles, they probably break for 30, 40 yards, maybe even go for touchdowns.
Yeah.
But he made the play every time. So
he and Tommy Eichenberg both, and Steel Chambers. Let's throw him in there. All 3 of those guys made some rock solid open field tackles that give your defense confidence and frustrate you as an offense, because I guarantee you Notre Dame watches this film. They're encouraged because they were tight with a team they were supposed to be a 17.5-point underdog against. And the reality is they weren't far away from either stretching the lead early or from bouncing back quickly. They were that close to breaking off a couple of big plays that they didn't, and credit goes to the Buckeyes for that. But Notre Dame was not far away. And so I think if you're a Buckeye fan looking at that, you give a real tip of the cap to the guys that made big open field tackles for sure.
Yeah. My second takeaway, getting into what we learned from Saturday night, is not so much who the starter is at running back, but who's the finisher. And it was mine. They rode the hot hand. To me, it really doesn't matter who starts, but who's running at the end that when they need to run it, which they did. So we know Ohio State can win sexy games. They can light the scoreboard up. But to win a game like that, I think gives them a lot of confidence, knowing, hey, it was kind of clunky at times. There was not much flow. and we still came out on top. And when we needed to do something, they could do it. So having that confidence going forward, I think is going to be huge. And another takeaway, just while we're on the running back topic, and we can talk about that if you want, is how excited Travion Henderson was for Mayan Williams when he punched in that score to kind of ice the game.
How about right before that?
Not sulking on the sideline like, hey, it's not my time to shine.
I want to go before that play because I had specifically written this down too, and I want to ask Tony Alford this. I forgive my ignorance if this is incorrect, but the TV camera actually caught this really well because Mayan had run a few plays in a row, including like a 14-yard carry to get them down to the 3. Maybe it was an 11-yard carry, but whatever it was, he got them basically inside the 5. And he looked a little gassed. And the cameras panned back to the sideline and caught Travion Henderson, and he's holding his arms out like this in front of him. And I half wondered to myself when I saw that if that was – and by the way, if you're listening afterwards, I made an X with my forearms because I know some people will watch this or listen to this after the fact. Travion made this signal out to Miles or out to Mayan, and I kind of wondered if that was Travion's way of telling him, don't you ask me to come out of the game. You go finish this drive because you've earned all the hard yards here late. When Mayan was hands on his hips and looked a little bit gassed as he was looking toward the sideline. And then the next play he scored. And obviously it was a tough 3 yards. It's not like he waltzed into the end zone. And then immediately after scoring, the camera panned back to the sideline, and Travion was the happiest guy in the sideline. So to your point, man, one of the reasons I love this team is because I genuinely get the impression that these guys love being good teammates, and that they're, people want to say, well, CJ Stroud only threw for 230 or 220 and, didn't look like his normal Heisman potential self. Who cares? Right. He just wants to win. They want retribution for what happened last year. And you can't fake that. And in those moments where you need guys to feel really good for other guys in the roster, go back and look at how the sideline reacted when Xavier Johnson scored his go-ahead touchdown and then made the special teams tackle on the kickoff the next play. I mean, it's a really tight-knit brotherhood that they talk about, but it's one thing to talk about.
That was a perfect example of it. Just seeing on that national stage, Travion could have easily been 2-3 guys back on the sideline like, hey, this should be me out here. But no, he was the first guy out there when Mayan scored, and that was fun to watch. The balance of the offense with 35, I think it was 35 runs, 34 passes. I mean, that's what Ryan Day talked about all week, and they did it. I thought at times Coach Day was a little funky play calling in the first half, probably almost like feeling out like, hey, what are they doing? What kind of looks are we seeing?
Yep, a little bit.
The second half, we saw all that. He just said, hey, we're just going to run it, which was great to see.
Well, and so from a CJ perspective, again, I try really hard to be objective. I'm not a homer. I think Ohio State's really good, and so we praise them a lot. But I'm critical, and I try to be fair when things don't look right. And I'm certainly willing to give credit to the opponent, man. Notre Dame played a lot better defense in the back end than I thought that they would. I also thought their defensive line was going to be driven more by Isaiah Foskey than it actually was. And that I guess I was under the impression that if he played well, the rest of the D-line would play better. And I thought Ohio State did a pretty good job not totally taking Foskey out of the game, but he was not the overwhelming presence that I thought he could be on the defensive line. And their line as a unit still played pretty well. They weren't in the backfield, knocking Ohio State off the line of scrimmage for negative plays repeatedly. But late in the game, part of why CJ looked as good as he did was because he made some really hard throws on the run. And that was because
I didn't know Mayan Williams could catch like that. So that play was incredible. If that doesn't go, or if they don't make that play, this game might end a little bit differently. So in watching a little bit about what Notre Dame did, I mean, they threw a lot of different looks
single bracket, double bracket, cover 0, cover 1, cover 2, 2-man under. That they made it difficult for Stroud to have to go through lots of different progressions. Most teams are probably not going to play the Buckeyes in man because Ohio State is as talented and skilled as they are on the outside. And we're going to get to that in a second too, because they're also young and that shouldn't be overlooked. The reason why CJ had to scramble the way he did was because the Irish have a pretty good defense. And I got to be honest, man, I kind of wonder if we go back at the end of the season and think about the best defenses that Ohio State played during the regular season, I bet you Notre Dame is going to be pretty darn high on that list. If they're not number one, I can't imagine too many defenses that are going to be better than what Ohio State just saw. And I'm not talking about it from a statistical output. I don't care how many yards they had or which players went off for big games. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. Notre Dame was really well coached, and they've got the skill players that kind of made life difficult for Ohio State. So I thought the coverage, especially in the back end, was tighter, and CJ is as good as he is because he can make the throws that were required. There were absolutely times in that game where Marcus Freeman, and he may have even said something to this effect after the game. I didn't catch all of it. There were definitely times in the game where Notre Dame as a coaching staff had to think that's an incomplete pass if he throws there. And it wasn't. And that's because CJ Stroud is that good. It's not because Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson was always making those 1 in 100 catches. It's because CJ was putting the ball in a tight window and he had talented players that could make some plays. But Notre Dame gave him a lot of different looks. I was impressed by going back at the film and watching how he performed.
Mm-hmm. What was one more of your takeaways from Saturday?
I've got a couple. Tyler Buckner started 8 for 8 in the first, I guess it was 18 minutes because it was the first quarter and then the first 3 minutes of the second quarter. He was 8 for 8 for 128 yards. He was 2 of 10 the rest of the game. I thought Ohio State that probably didn't do enough justice to the way the Buckeyes were playing defense, because Tommy Rees, to me, called a pretty good game. When Notre Dame tried to run the ball between the tackles and it clearly wasn't working, he essentially pivoted and said, okay, let's get the ball out of Buckner's hands as quickly as possible onto the perimeter, because the pocket wasn't lasting super long, but he had enough time to make quick throws. So those 8 of 8 throws, it's not like he was taking deep shots down the field and hitting home run balls. Once the Buckeyes got to a point where Notre Dame had to be more protective with the way they called plays because the field position wasn't very strong. You don't want to make a stupid mistake when you're inside your own 15-yard line. I just thought Ohio State did a really good job after basically the first quarter defending the pass. And they gave up a few first downs along the way, the Buckeyes did, but Notre Dame didn't have any crazy long drives. In fact, I've still got the drive chart up here. After Notre Dame scored a touchdown on what was their 4th drive of the game, their ensuing drives, 5 plays, 23 yards and a punt, 3 and out punt, 6 plays, 35 yards punt, 6 plays, 23 yards punt, 5 plays, 40 yards punt, 3 plays, negative 11 yards punt. So they only had 2 3 and outs. They picked up a few first downs, but Ohio State never let them get super deep. Those drives all ended. Let's see. The deepest they got on any of those drives was when they kind of weirdly punted from pretty deep in Ohio State's territory. But Notre Dame's average starting field position, was their own 17-yard line. the Buckeye defense, for as well as they were playing, they had a whole bunch of field to work with. And I think that kind of weighed into a little bit to what Notre Dame was trying to do offensively. So again, I thought Tyler Buckner was not too big for the moment. I thought he ran really well when he had to. He's a tough kid. He made a couple of pretty good throws. He made a couple of inexperienced plays, but he was not the reason that Notre Dame lost, in my opinion.
No, if you're a Notre Dame fan, I think you're extremely encouraged by what you saw out of Tyler on Saturday night in that environment for your first start. So I think he's going to be just fine moving forward. And you heard a lot of people commenting after the game, at least I did, and I saw it online, like, hey, first start for the quarterback, first year head coach, that environment, they're not that good of an offense. That's not true at all. And even if they weren't that good of an offense, Ohio State was giving up yards and points to bad offenses last year.
Sure.
So for them to have that performance in the second half is huge, and it's
college football is an offensive game.
Right. They're going to ride that confidence the rest of the season, knowing, because when we look back at the end, I mean, Notre Dame's going to be a 10-win team. So when people are saying, hey, that the offense wasn't that's just not the case. So,
yeah. Yep. I thought CJ made a couple of big time throws.
The one on the run to Mayan was
on the
incredible.
Run in particular. Yeah. He made a couple of them. The Mayan one was awesome. Marvin Harrison.
Can I ask you a question here that popped in from Hugh? And this is a thought that I kind of had during the game too, Hugh. But using a Mecca on some jet sweeps, almost like a Paris Campbell type use for a Mecca. Do you think they're going to see that to add an element to the offense? Because we really didn't see that Saturday night at all. What do you think about using a Mecca in that way?
Yeah, I mean, my impression was that Ohio State knew how young its wide receiver group was. And I think with the way Notre Dame was playing and the pressure that they were generating, especially late in the game, I almost feel like the Buckeyes were better off with less risky plays and just trusting the fact that Mayan was as physical as he was and hard to bring down. And it's way harder to bring a guy down when he's running full steam vertically than it is, to try to jet sweep and get to the edge. Missing Jackson Smith and Jigba maybe played into that a little bit. And I'm seeing a whole bunch of comments here on our live stream about that. We'll get into that hit in a second. I'm sure they'll work some of that stuff into the offense eventually, but to me, it just didn't feel like the game dictated that kind of play. I liked what Travion Henderson was doing on the couple of times he tried to get to the edge, but Ohio State was running the ball effectively between the tackles. So take the more conservative approach when it's working, right? If there's no reason to try to get tricky, that's just kind of how I operate, I guess.
If I had to bet, they have that in the arsenal for sure.
Oh, sure.
They busted out week one. No, you didn't really need to, but yeah, I think they're going to end up using a Mecca like they did Paris Campbell. A lot of quick screens, jet sweeps. I mean, he's a very similar type player.
He is. So let's talk wide receivers for a second here. There's obviously an awful lot of conversation around how talented that group is. I thought there were a few moments where they just looked as young as they are. It's not a lack of talent. The most obvious one to me, if you're watching the game, if you're at a bar or if you're at home and maybe you're talking, you're not even, truly paying attention, just kind of half watching. There was an instance late in the game where CJ Stroud, it looked like he threw behind Emeka Egbuka. I thought that was more on Emeka for not recognizing the zone fast enough and basically just sitting in a pocket of space that might have been 15 yards wide. He ran through it, and I think CJ expected him to slow down and sit, and that's why the ball ended up being thrown behind him. It was definitely a first down and maybe a touchdown because they were where that ball was thrown incomplete was probably around the 15-yard line. Just a few plays like that here and there where young receivers got caught maybe looking at the sideline for something as the ball was snapped and they were a little late off the ball. To me, that's just a rhythm thing. It's like, okay, it's week 1. Let's not overreact to this stuff. Give it certainly the next 2 weeks before you get to Big Ten play. I mean, Ohio State's going to have high expectations of these guys when they play Arkansas State and when they play Toledo. But I think the Buckeyes know that they're going to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage these next 2 weeks. And so working on the little things on the outside is going to show up maybe, more impactfully when Ohio State is back into the Big Ten play. Talent is there for sure, but I'm just not going to get worried about maybe a few little young mistakes here and there.
No, it's week 1. I mean, no, they play scrimmages against themselves, but there's going to be some growing pains when you got new guys on the outside. So all in all, week 1 was a success. Really not many drops. I mean, some tough throws that they maybe could have caught, but those plays will come. I mean, there was nothing concerning about what we saw from the receiver Saturday night. And to have a guy like Xavier Johnson, who when he scored the touchdown, Fowler had to check to see who that was. To have a kid like that make that play in that game is incredible. And to see, like you hit on it earlier, to see how excited his teammates got for him. And he's going to get more opportunities now that he went in there and did that in that moment. So, well,
especially with Jackson Smith and Jigba, in my opinion, unlikely to play the next couple of weeks.
What are you hearing there? Next 2 weeks,
there was a report that came out last night. It's not our original reporting. I saw it on 247 Sports that basically said that he was dealing with a minor hamstring injury and that it's a low grade strain and he's going to probably miss a game or two. Now, is that based on the severity of the injury or is that based on who they're playing? Right. It is so much more important for him to be healthy against Wisconsin than it is for him to be healthy the next 2 weeks. Right. So I would just anticipate that, he's going to get whatever treatment he needs to try to be healthy in 19 days, I guess, when they play Wisconsin.
Just the only other set these next couple of weeks out. If you need Jackson Smith and Jigba in these next 2 games, something went horribly wrong. So just let him get healthy and be ready to go for Wisconsin.
Yep. Only other thing I had written down here was twofold. I wrote down that JT Tuimoloau looked powerful. Michael Hall was overwhelming, and I thought Teron Vincent was pretty solid. I loved the way that Jim Knowles used Jack Sawyer, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that position evolves. I liked that sometimes he was in a 3-point stance, sometimes he was in a 2-point. He was inside, he was outside. There was a lot of pre-snap movement. Jim Knowles' defense is aggressive and fast and based on confusion. Mm-hmm. And especially for a young quarterback like Tyler Buckner, there had to be a few moments along the way where that was tough. And you certainly saw a couple of sacks that he took a pretty good lick on. Is that his fault? Is it the offensive line's fault? Did they slide the right way? I'm not an offensive line expert, but regardless, the Buckeye defense intended to be confusing and clearly was, which I thought was good. And the last thing I wrote down was just that Ohio State ran it when they had to. Early in the game, there were some moments where, personally, I'm like, okay, why are we going away from the run here? Is it because Ryan Day loves to throw the ball? Is it because he trusts C.J. Stroud, so inherently that he just wants to get that part of the offense going? Is it a reps thing for certain guys? What's the deal here? And the reality is, after the game, Ryan Day was asked by Doug Lesmerises at Cleveland.com. He said, essentially, we know what your offenses look like for 5 years. How much more satisfied are you, or is it more satisfying for you that you were able to win this kind of a game where you had to grind out tough yards on the ground? And Ryan Day had this big smile on his face. He almost cut Doug off. He's like, yes, it was.
I saw that.
Obviously meaningful that, when it was called upon late, Ohio State erased all those toughness questions for sure.
People's ears are probably going to bleed when I say this, but when I was watching Saturday night, it made me feel like that Michigan game and what Michigan did to us. We knew they were running it.
Yeah.
Couldn't do anything about it. That's what it felt like. So sorry to make people's ears bleed on.
That's what it
felt like Michigan. And so if they can do that down the stretch, and it doesn't matter who they use, they were both running it pretty well at the end, Travion and Mayan. So yeah. I saw a comment earlier asking about who the third running back is.
It's so third running back right now is Dallin Hayden. So, I mean, he obviously didn't get any offensive snaps. Admittedly, I didn't look to see if he played special teams.
I didn't see him out there from memory. I was looking for him too. I
mean, he definitely has gotten the praise of the coaching staff, and from Ryan Day in particular, he said, "Hey, Dallin's been really impressive. He is rock solid right now, our third guy, and we would feel comfortable using him if we had to." They just didn't get to that point. Maybe the game just didn't dictate it yet. So yeah, those are kind of the biggest takeaways from this game. You know, I'm encouraged by what I saw from Ohio State's defense for sure. I'm not concerned about what I saw offensively against what I thought was a really good team. And I anticipate that, you know, the Buckeyes the next couple of weeks are probably going to look a little bit more like what you're used to seeing because they're going to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage. And we'll talk a little bit more Arkansas State starting tomorrow. But in general, our rhythm on this podcast is going to be to kind of take Monday. I know a lot of people like NFL football on Sundays, and especially if Ohio State's playing a night game, which they tend to do almost half the time, you know, to be able to still take Monday and kind of look back at, okay, we watch the tape. Here are some of the things that we took away from the game before we start turning our attention to the next opponent on Tuesday. So we'll start talking about the coming week tomorrow. The schedule for the week is fairly normal. Ryan Day will address the media on Tuesday. We have learned that Perry Eliano, Ohio State's defensive backs coach, along with Tim Walton, but Perry Eliano is going to address reporters after Ryan Day, and then we will talk to CJ Stroud. That's coming up tomorrow afternoon. And then on Wednesday, Ohio State has media availability after practice, and we are going to check in with, let me give you who is supposed to be available here. Cam Brown, Mecca Igbuka, Zach Harrison, Ronnie Hickman, Donovan Jackson, Matt Jones, and JT Tuimoloau. Those are the players that are scheduled to make an appearance for us on Wednesday. So we'll get a little offense, a little defense, get a taste of both lines. That should be good. Looking forward to that. Thursday's Ryan Day's radio show. Friday is an off day for the media and a walkthrough for the team before they host Arkansas State on Saturday. And we continue on with this early part of the season where the Buckeyes come off with a 21-10 win. Craig, before we wrap it up, anything else you want to hit? The hit. Yeah, I want to talk about the
right. Yeah, let's talk about the hit. It was a bang play. I mean, elbow to the back of the head for sure. That was a tough one. I mean, it stinks to lose JSN on the second drive of the game, but was it an egregious hit? No. Was it? I was going to say
in real time, when you see a guy get hit and his helmet fly off, immediately you're irate.
Right.
And I was, before seeing the replay, I was really irritated that there was no flag thrown.
Especially in anytime you see that in today's game, there's a flag coming out.
Or at least reviewed, right? Mm-hmm. In trying to be objective, once I saw the replay, and especially once I saw it from the reverse angle, I was a little less upset about it. I still thought it should have been a penalty, but I thought the way Jackson was falling because of his leg kind of crumbling underneath him probably helped make that play look worse. And the defensive back clearly didn't lead with his head. He clearly led with his shoulder. And as Jackson was falling and turning and the way he hit him, you know, he hit him in the head, but it's a tough sport. I don't know. I can understand why they didn't throw the flag. If I were refereeing the game, I probably would have thrown it there. But I wouldn't have thrown it for targeting. I would have just called that unnecessary roughness. But it's a tough game, man. You're going to hit it hard.
The last two quick takeaways from Saturday, just not game related. I thought the new turf looked fantastic.
Yeah.
From seeing pictures on Twitter and Instagram, it was kind of hard to see the gray outline of the end zones. So I thought that looked really cool, kind of the lettering, if you will. So it made it kind of really pop. And they're kind of going to that new O, just barely tweaked a little bit in the middle of the field, kind of like a more 3D is not the word, but you're seeing it on a lot of apparel now, that different shaped O that they're going to. So that looked really good. And then coming in where the players run in from the tunnel, it's a black kind of carpet-like material. That needs to be changed to red if they're going to keep having all these star-studded affairs, because you just got to roll the red carpet out.
I like that.
I mean, if you have Adele at your game, everybody from Adele to Bronny James, I mean, it was just an incredible scene. Every 5 minutes, you're seeing the who's who of the sports world walk out of the tunnel. I mean, it speaks to have a former player, which we can get into that another time, whether Joe Burrow is a Buckeye or not. I mean, he's got a degree from there. But when you have former players show up that never got on the field to come support the team, and maybe he was there watching as a fan, but to have Joe Burrow there, Super Bowl quarterback last year, and just all the guys that were there to have the 9 or 10, I think the final count might have been 10 5-star recruits. I mean, to have Keon, the 5-star defensive end that I know they really want. I saw a comment earlier, I forget who said it, that if he could get a pick with LeBron, he would commit to Ohio State. I saw the picture on Twitter, so let's see if he holds true to that.
I like that
word. But just that's my only other thing. Maybe change that carpet to red coming out if they're going to keep having all these celebrities show up.
That'd be cool. I saw one other thing on here. We'll wrap up with the defensive target, or the targeting review on Mike Hall that was buzzed down when there was nothing from the booth that triggered a review on the Jackson Smith and Jigba hit. Yeah, I can understand why, as a Buckeye fan, that's frustrating for sure.
If that would have been targeting, that would have been bad.
Yeah, but to be honest, I mean, I thought they nailed the call correctly with Mike Hall. He clearly, it was not. He lowered the crown of his helmet because he tripped over the offensive lineman's leg. It wasn't because he was trying to spear the quarterback. He was coming in, as you're taught, and the offensive tackle who was holding up somebody, I forget who was rushing, kind of had his right leg out as he was trying to keep a wider base, and Hall clipped him and, stumbled forward. So much, to me, that's a much different scenario than what they're trying to take out of the game. And while the review was annoyingly long for that, they got the call right. So I'm good with that. I'm good with that. All right. That'll wrap up our upon further review, what we learned about Ohio State podcast when the Buckeyes opened the season with a 21-10 victory over Notre Dame. We are on to week 2. The Arkansas State Red Wolves coming to town on Tuesday here in the Shoe. The Buckeyes have a great home schedule with a lot of big-name opponents. This might not qualify as a big-name opponent, but if you want to see some offensive fireworks, Ohio State's a 44-point favorite against Arkansas State. I think you got a pretty good chance to see some offensive fireworks on Saturday. We've got a lot of coverage planned for you all week. We'll be live again tomorrow morning as we start talking about Arkansas State, and we'll let you know what we're expecting to hear from Ryan Day when he will address the media tomorrow afternoon. We'll have a Buckeye report, of course, from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center tomorrow after we hear from him. For Craig Hyson, I'm Brendan Gulick. Follow us on BuckeyesNow.com for all your latest written content. Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Buckeyes Now SI is our handle. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We love having such a great audience for this. We've been on for almost an hour, and we've had a boatload of conversation going. Much of it we use to kind of chat about some of the topics that we hit. So thanks for your participation in that as well, and look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Go Bucks. Have a great Monday holiday, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning.